What's up, guys, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of things to talk about, especially about the schedule that was released a couple of days ago. But we're going to start here with a question from the Ultimate Sports TV, who says, do you see progress from Odell and Baker, and why? And what kind of stat lines are you seeing from the two? Well, the thing with Odell and Baker, right, when you ask about progress, one of the things that I feel like has been buried in all of these like bad faith narratives about Odell and Baker just not being able to figure it out yet, one of the things I think gets lost is that there were points early in last season before Odell tore his ACL that did look like they were getting it together, right? The first Cincinnati game, there were points in the Indy game, especially in the first half before Baker threw 2 interceptions, or at least 1 interception. I don't know how many he threw in that game, but I think he threw more than 1. And there were points, especially the Dallas game, where it really looked like they were starting to get it together. And also remember that the chemistry was not there with any of the wide receivers in the first 6 weeks of the season. Everybody focuses on it being about, Odell and Baker didn't have chemistry the first 6 weeks. Odell and Baker had more chemistry the first 6 weeks of the season than Odell and Jarvis did in the first 6 weeks of this offense. Jarvis didn't really get going for the Browns until like week 10 or 11, and that's when he started to pick things up for this team. Now, part of that was injury, but also part of that was him getting used to the fit in the offense. So when we just isolate Odell and only look at the factors concerning Odell, I think a lot of gets lost in that narrative. I think the biggest thing that gets lost is that, one, Odell was a 1,000-yard wide receiver the last time he was healthy, which last time I checked, that's pretty good for a wide receiver to be. A lot of wide receivers in the NFL don't get 1,000 yards every year, so it's not very common. And despite what people may want you to believe, right? If Odell doesn't get 1,300 yards, he's no longer good. Also, another thing to consider is that the chemistry was showing. There was evidence of there being good chemistry between these two players before he went out with an ACL injury. Now, if your question is more along the lines of can Odell come back in his late 20s from an ACL injury, what the history is with that, and if he's going to be the same athlete, or are you just going to trust that Odell, being the caliber of player that he has been throughout his career, will he find a way to still be really good despite whatever the injury takes from him? That's a better conversation. But yeah, I do think that those two will get it together in year 3 more because they'll just have more time to get it together. I think they were making progress before the injury, and I think they're going to make even more progress after the injury, once they get more time together, once they're really able to, get that chemistry and gel together and really just get real game reps with each other in the same offense that they played in last year. I think that will be a huge factor in the blossoming of that relationship between those two players. Now, what kind of stat lines are we going to see? Look, we're not going to see crazy stat lines from Odell. I don't really predict that we're going to see crazy stat lines from Baker Mayfield because that's not what this team requires. And a lot of people, they sometimes drive me crazy and get a little brain dead when they talk about football because they talk about football as if the goal in football is to get these stats, right? To get 5,000 yards, to get X amount of touchdowns. They talk about that as if that's the end goal. And if the player doesn't reach that end goal in their mind, those stats, then they're not all of a sudden a good player, right? Like that always boggles my mind. Like some people are still trying to tell me that Baker did not have a good year 3 because he did not pass for over 4,000 yards in a regular season. Well, here's the thing about football. It's about the result. It's about winning the game. It's not about losing close. It's not about how many yards you put up or how many touchdowns you score. It's about winning the game. And what this team was able to do behind Baker Mayfield and what he was able to produce and the things that he was able to do. And again, people don't give him credit for his ability on 3rd and 4th down last year, especially 3rd and 4th and long, where he was really, really good. Again, nobody's going to give him credit on that front. Everybody's just going to act like he's Kirk Cousins or he's some dude who's not good in certain situations and act like they didn't watch these games. You know what I mean? So that always drives me crazy. So I don't want to give specific numbers on what these guys need to achieve in order for it to be a success. What this team needs to achieve in order for Odell and Baker to be a success is to have a top 5 offense in the NFL. That's what they need to achieve, is to have an offense that can put wins on the board. Because again, the goal isn't to have 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. The goal isn't to have, for Baker, isn't to have over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. No, the goal is to win football games. And how you win football games is you put together complete units. And however and whatever rations you need to put out the offense in order to have that complete unit is what you need to do. So if this offense is a top 5 offense at the end of the year, everybody did what they were supposed to do. They did their job and they did what they needed to do, because if you have a top 5 offense, you'll have a ton of wins this year. So that is what matters. I don't want to set some kind of barometer of success with a statistical number, because I think that puts people's mind in the wrong place, where you can be in this situation where the Browns go 11-5, they win a playoff game in Pittsburgh, which they have not done in years, right? And win a playoff game and win in Pittsburgh. And people are still like trying to figure out, oh, what's going on with Baker Mayfield because he didn't hit these statistical barometers that are arbitrary, when the goal in football is to win games. And what you have to ask yourself about a player to answer the question of if they are good or not is, did they contribute to winning? That's the most important thing. But that's just my little mini rant on just this kind of garbage arguments I'm starting to see online. I took the long way to get to that answer, but I hope that answer is satisfying to you, Malik Ultimate Sports TV. Next question is from C. Zachary Chad, and it says, how ready do you think our new defense will look by week 1? P.S. I love your collabs with G. Bush. I love those collabs too, and we do them frequently. Tune in to G. Bush whenever he's on 92.3 The Fan, because I might pop in every once in a while. But to answer your question, Zachary, the new look defense, will it be ready by week 1? No, it shouldn't be ready by week 1. Now, the question is, will it be good enough to play with in week 1? Yeah, I think it should be at that point. It should not be an embarrassment week 1 or resemble what last year was. It should be an improvement in week 1 to what the Browns were at the end of the season defensively. But it's not going to be complete week 1, right? Defense doesn't take as long to get it together as the offense, because defensive concepts are more universal. Just teams tend to run the same defensive playbooks. It's just different terminology and different roles and responsibilities. But it's not like offenses where one offense can be radically different from the other one. For the most part, whether you're running 4-3, 3-4, you're running similar concepts, right? Everybody's running a cover 1. Everybody's running a cover 2. Everybody's running a man scheme. Like, all of these concepts you run defensively are virtually the same. It's just differences in alignments, player positions, and roles that are the adjustment when it comes to defenses. So that's why defense never takes as long as offenses. And whenever there's like a new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, the cliche is that the defense will always be ahead of the offense, because defense is just a little bit more simple of a transition for new players. Now, that being said, I would say this defense should be close to complete probably 6 weeks into the season. That would be enough time to get everybody along. And also remember, Greedy, we don't know what Greedy's going to be like coming back from that nerve damage. And Grant Delpit, look, he looks great on those videos. He's sprinting already. It looks like he's ahead of schedule on his Achilles tendon. But just to be safe, we're talking about Grant Delpit really not being available to come back to practice until like late August, right before the season starts. And then you have to get him reacclimated to playing football. That could be a 6 to 8 week process till you can get Grant Delpit meaningful snaps in the football game, similar to Ronnie Harrison, where he didn't see meaningful snaps till like week 10 last year. So that's going to be a factor, and that's going to have to be something that's considered. But I do think the defense should be an improvement from last year in week 1. I just don't know if they're going to be what they're going to be at the end of the season until probably 6 weeks into the year. The next question comes from Jack Flynn, who says, how much do you think we utilize Kareem Hunt this year in the run and pass game? And do you feel he was underused last season? Nah, I feel like he was used a lot, actually, especially when Nick Chubb went down For a few weeks, he was the main running back. And, we kind of saw what some of the limits are with Kareem Hunt as the main running back versus having somebody who's just top of the league good in Nick Chubb. And not saying that Kareem Hunt's not a top 10 running back. He is. It's just Nick Chubb's top 2, maybe 1, maybe 2, depending on your opinion on things. So I don't think they underutilize Kareem Hunt. Do I think they're going to use him as much this year? Absolutely. Why not? They still like to go 5 wide with the running back checking to go out wide. So that's going to be there for Kareem Hunt. That's where he got a lot of his targets last year. He's still a reliable check down for Baker Mayfield, and Baker likes to go to him in check down situations. And he's still somebody who thrives running out the gun. So, yeah, I think he's going to see the same amount of snaps and carries and targets that he did last year. And I do think that's enough to use with Kareem Hunt, especially when we got Nick Chubb on the roster. Next question comes from Harry Skywalker, who says, do you think the Chiefs or playing the Chiefs week 1 was a good thing or bad thing for the Browns' division and playoff hopes? Well, objectively, for your division and playoff hopes, it's a good thing to get this game out the way early, just because you want to play some of these really tough in-conference games when you're at your healthiest, right? And you would assume, hopefully, right, knock on wood, that you would be at your healthiest at the beginning of the season as opposed to at the end. And again, conference games do affect the tiebreaker. So objectively, you're getting the Chiefs. Yes, they're going to probably be at their best shot, but at least you would be able to give your best shot at them, right? Hopefully you don't have any injuries that are going to pop up during the course of the year against them. I don't really think it affects the division. Look, the division is going to be handled within the division, right? If you want to win the division, it's not going to matter if you can beat the Chiefs. It's going to matter if you can beat the Ravens, who swept us last year, if you can beat the Bengals, who you swept last year, and if you can beat the Steelers, who you won 2 or 3 games with, right? That's going to be the most important factor when it comes to winning the division. You can win or lose that game with Kansas City. It ain't really going to matter that much when it comes to the division. And when it comes to playoff hopes, I imagine that the Chiefs are going to win a lot of games this year. So I don't know if that's going to be a huge factor. Maybe this comes back along the line, best case scenario, for a number 1 seed tiebreaker. But other than that, I don't know how much it's going to really be that detrimental of a game, especially in week 1. The next question comes from Wally Ahmad, who says, hey, Q, how do you feel about playing the Ravens in a 3-week period? I feel if things are going to go according to plan, we could take them out of division race, specifically if we win first in Baltimore. Yeah, look, this is favorable for Cleveland the way this lined up. I know it looks kind of goofy, but this is actually so favorable to Cleveland that I can see Baltimore fans having a legitimate grievance with the schedule makers with how this landed up. Because if you don't know, the Ravens are playing the Browns, then they play the Steelers, then they play the Browns again, right? And they play the Browns on Sunday Night Football at the start of that, so it's a semi-short week, right? You don't get that extra time on Sunday to rest. And that is really just not favorable for the Ravens, right? Because let's run through a scenario, right? Best case scenario for the Browns. The Browns win that game against Baltimore, right? Now the pressure is on Baltimore because not only is your next game Pittsburgh, who you have a real rivalry with, but also the next game you play against Cleveland, well, that's at Cleveland, right? That's going to be a home game for the Browns. So now your back is against the wall because if the Browns get swept by the Ravens, the Browns aren't winning the division, and vice versa, right? If the Ravens get swept by the Browns, they're not winning the division. And both those games being so close next to each other and the Browns having extra time to prepare for those games is really a favor for the Browns and not really favorable for the Ravens there. So I feel good about that. That's good. And if you lose that game at M&T Bank Stadium on Sunday Night Football, you get a bye week to reassess and to go out and play these games. But again, the Ravens have such a unique offense that I think only the Arizona Cardinals come close to playing, and you do get to play the Cardinals before you play the Ravens, so you get to prepare for that even more, that it's real helpful to just get those games out the way as close to each other as you can get them. And this is perfect for when you want to play those types of teams. Now, can the Browns capitalize on that? That's the $1,000,000 question. But as far as layout, they're given no disadvantages there, in my opinion. Next question comes from Omar, who says, out of the Bears, Vikings, Chargers, and Cardinals, who are you most worried about? 1 through 4. By the way, I love the vids queue. I would be most worried about the Chargers because they're going to test the verticality of this defense. Second most worried about the Cardinals because Kyler Murray is a dynamic threat. Third most worried about the Vikings because they actually have a good team. They just don't execute well most of the time. Fourth, worried about the Bears because I just don't know what their situation is. I think they're a decent team. They have a really good defense. Offense is kind of anemic, and I don't know if Justin Fields is going to be ready in year one to carry an offense. So all that would probably put the Bears at 4, but I think they're all solid teams and more solid than I think people are giving them credit for. I think people are looking at that as those are going to be cakewalk games. I don't think any of those are cakewalks. Next question comes from Ben Smith, who says, how much effect do you think having guys like Odell and Clowney fully healthy for Kansas City week 1 is going to be? It's going to be a massive effect, right? Because those are dynamic playmakers. And again, a lot of people like to forget this portion of when Odell was out last season, but the Browns offense was lacking a critical element last year when Odell went down that they could not recover from, which is the ability to stretch the field and the ability to beat man coverage most of the time, right? We saw that with the Baltimore Ravens when the Baltimore Ravens were able to just put their corners out and just stop the Browns passing game. It took until they went like 3 slot corners down for the Browns to be able to move the ball because their wide receivers just couldn't beat man. That's the issue when you don't have somebody like Odell who can eat up some teams' premium corners, right? So instead of Marlon Humphreys being on Odell and Marcus Peters being on Jarvis, and you're allowing your younger guys to run against less experienced or less as good cornerbacks that the Ravens have, now you're running into situations where the Ravens can mess around and put Marlon Humphreys on Donovan Peoples-Jones, and that's not something you want to see happen, right? So, yeah, Odell being back gives you, and the same thing happened with the Chiefs, by the way. Odell being back does definitely help your ability to be more explosive and just be more versatile in your passing game when it comes to what kind of concepts you can beat. Nobody's really going to throw a ton of man at you if you have Odell on the field because it's not a recipe for success for defenses against Odell if Odell is still Odell. So that is a huge factor. Clowney, obviously going to be a huge factor. Giving Myles Garrett help that's better than Adrian Claiborne is going to be massive when it comes to the rematch in that. The next question comes from Legit Take, who says, hey Q, love the vid. Statistically, what does a breakout season look like for Baker Mayfield? Looks like a lot of analysts say he will take a jump in year 2 in his offense. In your opinion, what does that look like statistically? More wins than losses. No, I'm not going to do that to you. Look, I went on a rant earlier in this video about how I don't want to put statistical barometers on things. What you would want to see from Baker is maintaining that touchdown to interception ratio and doing more of what he did in the second half of the season throughout the entire season, right? If we just get second half Baker Mayfield for the whole season, I think you got one of the best offenses in football, and I think you have one of the better quarterbacks in football because I truly do believe Baker was playing at a pure top 10 level. Like, it wasn't debatable. He was top 10 after about week 6 or 7. So if he can just take what he did there and translate that to the whole season while enhancing the touchdown to interception ratio, at worst maintaining what he did last year, then this team is going to be in a really good position. That's, to me, what a leap will look like. I felt like he took a big leap last year. So what I want to see is no regression and maybe some slight progression, right? I'm not expecting him to double his numbers or have Patrick Mahomes numbers because I don't necessarily think Baker's going to be the kind of guy who does those type of things. But I would like to see Baker continue to be that guy that he was on 3rd and 10s last year and 4th and longs and 4th and shorts last year, where he was pretty dependable and easy to count on, and maybe even enhance that. We saw him run a lot more at the end of the season last year, which I think was very effective. I just want to see more of what I saw from him in the last half of last season, and that's really all I expect and want from Baker Mayfield, because I think he proved last year that he could play at a top 10 level. And if you have a top 10 quarterback in the NFL with the defensive roster the Browns have and the offensive roster the Browns have, if you're cooking with gas and you can make the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, that's what my expectations are for Baker this year. But that's it for the questions this week, guys. Again, thank you guys for asking them. Have a great day. Have a good night.